the excitement of a new academic year. Please come in, find a seat. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. We're so excited to be officially kicking off interest areas this semester. There they are. You can read them on all of our t-shirts. This morning, we'll start with our special keynote presentation from our very distinguished guest speaker. And after that, we'll take a quick 15-minute break, and then we invite faculty to return for the Academic Senate update. And I'm sure you're already aware of the classified management and faculty breakout sessions that are scheduled from 1 to 3 this afternoon. Those sessions will be facilitated by members of the Interest Area Steering Committee after lunch. Speaking of lunch, I hope you've all registered for the Lunch and Learning Resource Center event. That's taking place from 12 to 1 p.m. today in the LRC Library Building. There will be tour guides on the second, third, and fourth floors to show off our newly remodeled library. So you can pick up your boxed lunch in the second floor lobby and refresh yourselves in the location of your choice on the third floor, on any of the library balconies, in LR 201, still fondly referred to by many of us as the rare books room, or in the professional development office in LR 121. Following lunch, we invite you to tour the beautiful, colorful, and very welcoming student service area in the library. If you haven't been in there recently, the changes in the LRC are pretty breathtaking. It's really a stunning model of a 21st century educational space, and it will serve our students and community well for quite some time to come. Thank you to everybody involved in that remodel project. Special thanks to our award-winning manager, Sabrina Pape, for her leadership and vision. And now it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce this morning's keynote speaker. Dr. Kay McClenney is a multiple award-winning expert in higher education who serves as senior advisor to the president and CEO of the American Association of Community Colleges, in addition to working as an independent consultant and partner for MC² Consultants. She was the founding director of the Center for Community College Student Engagement at the University of Texas, Austin, from 2001 to 2014, during which time she served as a faculty member in the program in higher education leadership at that institution. UT Austin is also where she earned her doctorate in educational administration. Dr. McClenney has published and spoken widely on the topics of education, strategic planning, accountability, student success, and leadership. She's a committed advocate for diversity and equity in higher education. And she's well known for her emphasis on issues of structural racism and disproportionate outcomes. It would be difficult to find anyone more well qualified to educate and inspire us as we design our own pathways to support student equity and success. Please join me in warmly welcoming our distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Kay M. McClenney.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to know that I get to have one of those t-shirts. And I am really happy to be part of the energy that you bring around the beginning of a new semester for students, but also around the launch of the interest areas for Sierra College and your students. The work on guided pathways across the country is something that I have been a part of, that I continue to advocate for, and it's really a treat to see a college that has taken this up and is making the progress that you are making. There's a lot of work that's going on. And so thanks to all of you who have been a part of that. Thanks all of you who become a part of it today in the sessions around the interest areas. And I want to take a moment to particularly recognize any adjunct faculty who may be with us today. It's my understanding that this is a sort of an inaugural time for inviting adjunct faculty to join in the conversation. Would those of you who are here please stand up and be welcomed and recognized? So that's pretty fabulous. It's pretty fabulous, and we're going to do several things today. I'm going to do a bit of a reprise and a reinforcement of the what's a pathway conversation and why are we doing this. And I'm going to particularly focus on some of the questions and issues around equity and how we can build equity as we design and implement guided pathways for all of our students. And the whole interest area phenomenon and some of the work that you're going to be doing together this afternoon. So let me just get started on that. I always think it's important to recognize that the world didn't begin with guided pathways. There's been a lot going on across the country in community colleges and certainly in California over the last decade and a half. Specifically pertaining to improving student success, improving outcomes for students, improving college completion rates and transfer, but also a focus on closing the equity gaps that exist across diverse groups of students. And so acknowledging that there's been a lot going on is an important part of where we start here, that we are building on and very often learning from and integrating those practices that many of you have been working on over the years. I want to tell you how I came to this. In 2012, the American Association of Community Colleges published a national report that was developed by the 21st Century Commission on the Future of Community Colleges. It was one of those Noah's Ark kind of groups. You know, it had people nationally who were leaders from community colleges. We had community college faculty. We had people from K-12 and university life. We had people from the corporate and business community and from think tanks and research centers around the country. And so over a period of time, this commission heard from a lot of research, a lot of evidence emerging, a lot of think tank reports. And out of that came a number of themes that were disturbing. Themes about our society, the fact that the American middle class is shrinking, the fact that family income, per capita family income, is going down rather than going up. One that really hit people was the reality that a child born poor in America is more likely than ever before to stay poor throughout his or her lifetime. And that's what this particular graphic will show. The Fading American Dream. So the name of the report was Reclaiming the American Dream, Community Colleges and the Nation's Future. Because where the commission went then was to say, if we are going to be able to reverse these undesirable trends in the society, a lot of the heavy lifting for that work is going to happen in America's community colleges. Anybody disagree with that? That's why you're here, I guess. And then there was a big but. And the big but was that if we are going to be successful in reversing those trends, contributing mightily to their reversal anyway, then we as community colleges are going to have to dramatically redesign the educational experience that we provide for our students, because the outcomes we have been getting are none too good. The outcomes we have been getting in terms of completion, in terms of equity, leave a great deal to desire. And it's not because we haven't been working hard. It's not because we haven't been well motivated and intending to serve our students well. There are things that we have learned out of all of this. And so we're going to come to that in just a moment. I just want to point out that the commission in its recommendations was very specific about providing support for community colleges in designing more coherent, structured pathways for their students to certificate, degree completion, and to transfer. Now, people who know me well, which many of you don't, know that you can't get out of the room with me without talking about data. And so I'm going to go through a few data questions because they serve two purposes. One is they serve as part of the argument, part of the prompt, part of the answer to the question, why would we do guided pathways? And they also, some of them in particular, help us to monitor our progress, to see how we're doing. And we'll want to keep doing that even as you are implementing your pathways in your interest areas. So, how many of you know the answer to this question? What percent of entering students who go through all the stuff we put them through for application, for FAFSA, for advising, for registration, all that kind of stuff, they're there in your class on census date, and yet they never complete a single college credit? Anybody know the answer? 40%. Thank you for being an outlier. Okay. Now the answer, I don't know the answer for you. I suggest you find it. I will tell you that I've arm wrestled a number of people in colleges to get them to answer that question. It's answerable. And across the country, the average that I have found is about 18%. So I was sitting in the Maricopa colleges not too long ago, 10 community colleges, part of the same district. And while I was talking about this, the institutional researcher was there with his laptop and he figured it out. Maricopa is 18%. Okay, that's 18% of our students who want to be here, who have found a reason to be here, who never complete a college credit. Now, what I'm going to say is across the United States, across American higher education, the most common outcome for college students is accumulation of credits and debt, but no credential. That's our common outcome, and it's not one that serves us well for the future. So, next question. This becomes one of our new gold standards, and it is because it is highly predictive of students' future progress, completion, transfer, success. So, what percent of entering students complete college-level English and math in their first academic year? Anybody know the answer right now for Sierra?
Complete English within their first year, 25% complete math within their first
Stand up and say it again. Okay, say again.
2017 entry cohort, 30% completed English within their first year, 25% completed math within their first year. I don't know the union of those two.
Okay, all right. That is great. Okay, but the numbers aren't that good. And why is it that we don't have more students completing college-level math and English in their first year? Because most of them are where? They're in developmental, in basic skills courses, and that's what, as a sector, as a community college field, that's what we're getting over here. How many of you know the story, the data recently out of Cuyamaca College in California? Okay, so, all right, since you're the data guy, do you want to tell that? You want to tell the Cuyamaca story? They went whole hog, full scale into co-requisite instruction in math and English and...
First of all, no, I'm not going to sing it. So they went whole hog on getting rid of their developmental courses, pushed everybody into transfer level courses with concurrent support, and it looks amazing. Very, very good, and largely eliminated or severely decreased their
Yeah, they went from 16% completion in the first year to like in the 60s and 70s in math and English in 1 year. In 1 year, they did this because they decided to take it really seriously. So they're standing as a great example for California and, in fact, for the rest of the country. So That is one of the predictive early momentum indicators we want to be looking at. Do you know what % of your students complete a full program academic plan by the end of their first semester?
Sorry, could you say that again?
What % of your entering students complete a full program educational plan by the end of their first semester? Now, we're accustomed to advising and counseling students so that they can, they create a schedule for a semester, and then before registration for the second semester, we work with them to create the schedule for the second semester. I'm talking about here's where you're starting and here's where you're ending with transfer, with a job, with a baccalaureate, and you have the plan for doing that. Okay. This is another way of monitoring our progress in the Guided Pathways work, because having that educational plan complete for most students by the end of the first term is one of the milestones we are seeking to complete. Why? Why? It gives them a finish point. I'm going to tell you, I've done hundreds of focus groups with community college students and also major national survey research for community college students on their experiences. And every year, for about 15 years, we've asked community college students to identify what are the most important services you provide for them. Every year, nationally and in every college where I have looked at the data for CESI, the Community College Survey of Student Engagement, students identify academic planning and advising as the most important service we provide for them. And so we say to them in focus groups, so why is this important? They say, because I need a map. Because I need a pathway, a map that shows me the steps that I need to take along the way from where I am to the better and different place that I want to be 2 or 3 or 5 or 8 years from now. And what they say is that having those milestones competes with all the other stuff going on in their lives. When their grandmother dies, or their child has tonsillitis, or their work shift changes, all those things that happen in life for students, that having goals, having a map, is what keeps them coming back on Monday and in January and in the summer and the following fall. Okay, data guy. I want to know who you are. Tell me. It's God. It's God. Okay. Eric. It's Eric.
Let's name was different.
Oh, he has another name? Oh, okay. Okay. All right. I know Eric, by the way. And all right. How many of you know the answer to this question? What % of entering students complete at least courses in their program of study, in their major, in their first year? You need to know this. You need to know this, and the answer for most colleges as they start is very low, because where is it that our students are? Okay, they're in basic skills courses. They're not taking courses in their major. This turns out to be really important because why? This is a technical term. It's sticky. It is a sticky experience for students to come to college and be engaged in content that is about the reason they thought they came to college in the first place, or that they have discovered is why they're in college. And it also creates momentum in their progress through their programs. All right, this is not really a bonus, and it's sometimes very painful. Looking across your college, what is the average number of college level, not basic skills, college level credits earned by an associate degree graduate from Sierra College? 96. Who knows that answer? Okay. Okay, it's like we need buzzers, right? Okay. 96 credits for a degree that is supposed to be what? 60. Okay, so let me just say this, and I will say this to be provocative. We can argue about it a little later on if you like. We're going to have a lot of time to talk. There is nothing okay about 96 credits for an associate degree. That represents student time, money, opportunity cost, and lost Pell Grant status. It represents parent and taxpayer investment. It is not a good thing. And so if I had to pick one piece of data as a rationale for why colleges should do the kind of work that Sierra's been doing on creating maps for programs, aligning course sequences, making it clear to students what courses they need to take and what order they need to take them in order to finish up and achieve their goals, that's the way we have to do it. So, 96 is a good starting point. I will tell you that when we first started looking at those data, we looked across the state of Texas, very large community college state, and the average across Texas was 93. I work with a college, which shall remain unnamed, but it's in Austin, where the average is 104. So this is, I just want to say that this is one of the fundamentals behind the Guided Pathways work, that the pattern of college participation for our students, by and large, has been that they wander into the college, they wander around the curriculum, and then they wander out the door. That is part of what we are hoping to correct. I'm not going to dwell here. I think it goes without saying that there's a lot going on in California. There always is, but we seem to be at a point where there's even more than usual. We have from the Chancellor's Office the Vision for Success, and the one that I wanted to bring your attention most closely to is always design and decide with the student in mind. This is about a major shift in our thinking and in our cultures in higher education. That is an acknowledgement that, folks, this is not about us. This is about students. This is not about what is convenient for us, what we prefer. It's about what works for students to help them achieve their higher education goals. And so, very quickly, reprise. I know some of you have been deeply into the literature on guided pathways. Some of you have been working on this since, I think, as early as 2015, 2016. And others of you are just coming to the party. So we're going to be quick. But what's the evidence that brings us here? And this is really one of the big ones. Community colleges have been brilliant at inventing, California is extra brilliant, at inventing initiatives and projects and special funding and all of that sort of stuff that often produces good results for small numbers of students. And so we've been inventing and doing these strategies and programs and projects. Some of them are California, some of them are national, some of them are foundation funded, some of them are locally grown. And what we learn is that all of those discrete strategies don't add up to significant change in the outcomes for our students or significant change in the equity gaps that disturb us when we care to look at them. So why? Why? One is that, one of the ways of using innovation is that we use those innovative programs as decoration. We brag about them, we write about them, we talk about them at conferences in California and nationally, and we array them around the margins of our institution so that they pretty much don't bother too many people. And the result is that they don't produce significant increments in student outcomes, graduation, transfer rates. They do not reduce equity gaps in a significant way, and we don't integrate them into a coherent educational experience for students. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So we have just learned the limits of what has been our favored approach to the student success and college completion agenda. So this one comes from organizational design and development. And just think about it. Every college, every program, every service, every course is pretty much perfectly designed to produce precisely the results we're currently getting. Right? Okay. All right, so if you look at your results and you're not happy that, only 6% of your students ever achieve 30 credit hours in the first year? Have I got that data right?
We're up to 7.5.
7.5% of your students complete 30 credit hours in their first year. If you're not happy with your graduation rates, if you're not happy with continuing equity gaps in all of the metrics that we use, then what's the implication here? If we're perfectly designed to get the results we're getting, we might have to change the design. Thank you. Thank you. And this one is from Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay. All right.
We need to look at that a long time.
I'll leave it with you. Okay. Another thing that happened fairly recently in this century is that the community college world discovered behavioral economics and decision theory. And there's a lot that we've learned out of that. There was a great article in Newsweek magazine several years ago that sort of synthesized the brain science about what the human brain does when faced with information overload. And what happens is that when we got too much information, too many choices in front of us, essentially what happens is that the part of the brain that is responsible for making good decisions freezes or leaves the premises. Seriously. And so either we start making bad decisions, emotionally based decisions, doing what my sister did or my cousin, or we default and don't make any decision at all and wander out the door. How many of you have purchased a cell phone plan recently? That would be an example. I had an encounter in a North Carolina community college not too long ago where, while I was talking about something like this, a woman came up who had just recently arrived in the US from India. She had a PhD. She was teaching anatomy and physiology, and it was her first semester. She arrived. She needed some basic things in order to get herself set up, like toothpaste. And so a faculty member kindly took her to Walmart and pointed her towards the toothpaste aisles. Aisles, plural. So you can get fluoride or not, and baking soda or not, and a lot of whitening or little whitening or no whitening at all, or the best whitening ever. You can get a lot of things. And she said, "Kay, I just wanted to brush my teeth." So there are a lot of examples of this in daily life, but the example for our students is that they are blinded and confused by the array of options that are provided to them when they arrive at our colleges, unless they have some guidance that helps them make informed choices. And so that's what we're about doing, and behavioral economics tells us that these things matter. This is one of my favorite quotes. Those of you who have not read Judith Scott Clayton's paper, students finding a path to completion is the equivalent of navigating a shapeless river on a dark night. So if visual images help you think about why it is we're doing this, we're trying to get away from shapeless and dark to informed and clear and transparent. Cognitive science. Students benefit when they have clear goals, a sense of where they're going. Instructional program coherence actually improves learning. When we structure things so that students make intellectual connections within and across disciplines, it matters to their learning. And there are things that we've learned from our decades of student success initiatives. One of them is that scaling things to serve all of our students, employing the practices that we have learned from evidence matter and work for them. It's hard to do. It's politically hard. It's intellectually hard. It's financially challenging sometimes. I often go to community colleges and dare people to tell me what they've stopped doing recently. Anybody have answers to that? Anybody have answers to that? Think about it. Think about whether every single one of your committees, work groups, task forces is serving the purpose that it once served 20 years ago. I'm serious, because this is a lot of work. Those of you who have been doing it know it. Those of you who are joining in are going to learn it quickly. It's meaningful work. It matters for students. But we do need to think about how we spend our time as organizations and as individual professionals. And I'll just say that one of the reasons I'm so gratified to be here today is because this room is full. And this work cannot be done without the full, genuine engagement of faculty, of adjunct faculty, of counseling faculty, of others in student affairs. It cannot be done. It affects everybody. The work that we do and the way that we work together. We're real fond of our cafeteria of courses and options for students. Some of us take great pride in having very large, rich inventories of courses. So when I was at a very large multi-college district recently, which shall remain nameless, but it's in Phoenix. They're big. So I asked how many courses are in the course inventory. The answer was 10,000. Don't do that until you know about your own place. Yeah, okay, so, and then I said to the provost, I said, let me guess that 80% of your students are in 25 of those courses. And she said, no, 85 of our students are in 20 of those courses. And so let's give them several hundred for educational enrichment and breadth, and then acknowledge that the rest of that course inventory represents resources. Represents intellectual faculty resources, labs and books and all kinds of things. And we really need to think about that this is about our students. It's not about us. Always, when you talk about changes this magnitude, there are concerns, there are questions, there are intellectual questions, there are questions about how does this affect me, and we need to respect them. We need to have them on the table. We need to be talking about them. Today represents another opportunity to do that. And this is from Kay. I just want to say that over the time that I have spent researching the student experience in community colleges and listening systematically to community college students, there are a few things I've learned. One of them is that the early key to student success and persistence in college is connection. Connection and a sense that they belong here. It's connection with other students, yes. It's connection with other students, it's connection with faculty, with counselors, with other student affairs people, and it's connection with the subject matter. If we don't build meaningful connections with our students by the third week of class, we, in all likelihood, will lose them. And do you know, here's the good news, do you know how much it costs to make meaningful connections with students? Nada, zero, nothing. It costs a decision on the part of a campus community to be that kind of place, that kind of connected campus, that kind, and I don't mean technology, I mean human connection. This one is really important. We've learned a lot about the array of stellar supports and services that community colleges provide in California and across the country. And it's one of the things that really sets our colleges apart, and we're proud of it. But what sticks with me for more than a decade of research is the persistent gap that exists across community colleges between all of the services and supports that as a college we provide operative word provide, operative word offer, as contrasted with what students actually experience. And the reality is that the students we most need to serve, the students who most need our support, are the ones who are least likely to be getting it. And so the answer to that in the Guided Pathways model is that we make academic and student support inescapable. We embed it in our interest areas and in our pathways so that it becomes not optional, not a referral process, but the way we do college around here. This will be on my gravestone. And I didn't just start saying this for the fun of it, I started saying this because students told me this. In focus group after focus group, we would be asking students about their experience in something like an orientation or a college success strategies course or a first year experience or the tutoring lab or whatever. And they would start saying things like, this should be mandatory. They could be talking about any one of those things. And they use that word, they use the word mandatory. And so knowing that you would be doubtful, I push back and I say, okay, so what do you mean by this should be mandatory? And then they would define the word for me. They would say, huffily often, that means that all students should be required to do this. And I would say, okay, let's take this as a premise and say, so what if you came to this college and the college student success course was mandatory? What would you do? And they said, well, first we'd whine. Okay, first you'd whine, and then what would you do? Well, then we'd do it. Why would you do it? Because you said we had to. And here's the deal. They clearly believe, and they explicitly say that it is our job as professional educators to design a college experience that incorporates the kinds of things that they need to experience in order to be successful. They think that's our job. They're right. Thank you. All right, they are right. And that's what we're doing. That's why we are here today, and that's what you're going to be doing, many of you, in your interest area groups this afternoon. I do ask you to continue asking this question. Okay, quickly. So the Guided Pathways model comes along and it purports to be an answer to some of the things that we have learned about discrete, unconnected activities, interventions, and so on, about incoherence in our curriculum and thus in students' experiences. And so we are intentionally designing clear, coherent, structured educational experiences that incorporate the best of what we've learned, the evidence-based practice that has emerged from all of that work that we have previously done. Important thing about these pathways is that they are designed with the end in mind, that we want to ensure that, as Uri Treisman says, that we're not building 6-lane highways into a swamp, that we are building pathways that lead purposefully to particular places, to transfer options for students where their courses will transfer without loss of credit to the major at the transfer institution, and so that we are connected to the employer community, so that we are putting students out there for jobs and careers with the skills and the knowledge that they need in order to secure family supporting jobs. Many of you are familiar with these pillars. I'm not going to dwell here except to say that as we build pathways, some people really think of this as being primarily about creating coherent course sequences, aligning our courses, our learning outcomes, and so on, and that is certainly centrally important, and it's work that Sierra has been about for some time. But once we have that aligned sequence of courses that leads to certificates, to associate degrees, that transfers, that leads students into careers and jobs, then there are a whole lot of other things that we have to do. There are design decisions that faculty have to make, and many of them need to be made between faculty and student services people jointly. What's the right math for this program area? That is the math that students need in order to be successful in transfer and in jobs and careers. What are the general education core courses that we would recommend, the electives that we would recommend to enrich and round out and reinforce the educational experience for these students? So, interesting conversations, and I know you've had some of these. Do we think business students ought to take ethics? So that was a short conversation. Okay, that kind of thing. Do we think that music majors ought to take math? Yeah. Do we think that math majors ought to take music? Yes. Okay. Those are very cool, important faculty conversations that are about bringing richness and coherence across disciplines and within disciplines for students. Then we get to other things that I think will be also part of your discussions in your interest area. How do we embed discipline-appropriate academic supports into our pathways? We know community college students need academic support. We know that if we use it as a referral, as an option for students, that the ones who most need it don't participate. So how do we make sure that students experience support in a discipline-appropriate way? That could be required study groups for students. It could be time in a tutoring lab. It could be time in a math or writing lab. It could be supplemental instruction. It could be a lot of different things. And do you know what all of those things are in essence? They are all different ways of packaging time on task. And as it turns out, and I love to remind us, it turns out that no college student was ever actively harmed by additional time on task. And so then I say that, and then faculty very often and understandably say back to me, we can't do that, we can't require that, we can't require students to do those things because they're busy. They have multiple challenges, they have a lot of stuff going on in their lives. And what I do then is say, what you have at your disposal is this thing called a syllabus. When you think about it, a syllabus is all about time on task. It's where we say, you will read this, you will write that, you will do this paper, you will do this experiment, you will do. We just have to do it right. We have to incorporate in the syllabus the kind of time on task that evidence suggests will most promote the learning and the success of our students. Is that making sense to you? Okay. All right, good. I'm just going to throw that slide up there. Only you read it. I'm not going to read it to you. I just want to make the point that this is big, that there's a lot of work that we're doing. And beyond integrating academic support, then we want to talk about pedagogy. We want to talk about where along these pathways in these sequence courses, where are we ensuring that students have experiential learning experience, applied learning, experiential, field work, internships, group projects, service learning, all kinds of things. We know we can do that in nursing, clinical placements, but we can also do it in geography. We can do it in history. We can do it across the curriculum, and it is the most powerful teaching strategy that we can use with community college students. Active, applied learning. So we have to be intentional about where is it in our pathway, in our interest area that students are inevitably going to experience this, and then we can talk about co-curricular learning and how to align co-curricular learning with the curriculum that we have carefully designed and sequenced. In fact, 86% of American community college students never, ever participate in college-sponsored co-curricular activities. Now, for those who do, it can be a powerful educational experience, but also a powerful retention tool. So what can we do in our interest areas that aligns appropriate co-curricular opportunities for our students. Okay. I take students with me wherever I go, and James is one of the two that I brought with me today. Some of you have seen this because I'm particularly fond of James. There was a period when I had a foundation grant that allowed us to do longitudinal focus groups with community college students around the country. And we went at this time of year to a number of colleges, and we bribed students with gift cards and pizza and got them out of lines they were standing in to do focus group with us before school started. Then again in the third week of classes, again in like November, again in January, and then in April at the end of their first year. When we lost students, and we did, I also had to purchase psychotherapy for my staff. When we lost students, we tracked them down and did individual interviews with them. And so please notice the time marks on the upper right of this video. Let's hear from James.
I like to push myself mentally. I like to listen in and learn new things, and I know that's what college is all about. You know, they teach me stuff high school won't, and I'm all about learning new things. I love education. So
I have to admit I was nervous too, like any incoming freshman, but you know, it's just, you know, you just got to see it as, you know, just another day at school. So like, you know, you just adapt to it. I mean, I did. It's easy. It's just a lot of homework. I don't like homework. I mean, school's all right, you know, I like it, but it's just, you know, it's not for everybody. And, you know, I guess I'm just one of those people that it's not for. Maybe sometime later on in life, I'll pick it back up again, but, you know, just, it is what it is.
So, have any of you had James in your classroom?
I was James.
I'm sorry? You were James. Okay. Then you can speak to us some truth. So right after this last focus group, he dropped out of school. And we went and we found him and we interviewed him. So what is your guess about what happened? What happened here? No, somebody needs to speak up. Overwhelmed? Not exactly. Not exactly. He did not make the connection that we talked about earlier, and part of the missing connection was that he didn't find purpose. He didn't find purpose and direction, and he didn't get help in finding purpose and direction. So you should know that when we interviewed James, I often hear from faculty that they wish students would take responsibility for their education, and James took all the responsibility. He said, "This is all on me." I beg to differ. I think that James stands as a good opportunity for us to say, what is it that we could have done differently that might have made the difference in this articulate, bright person's life? And that's what we're trying to do here. Purpose, connection. All right, so we're moving away from this. That's us. And importantly, we're moving into some really significant shifts in the way we do our work, as I said, and the way we work together. We are rethinking those programs. We are getting clearer and more coherent. We are doing all of these things in the program shift. We are paying attention to what we have learned from students about what entering students want to know. And so as you think about your onboarding process in the first week of class, and so on. I challenge you to understand who it is at this college by name who is going to ensure that students get the right answer and the same answer every single time about these questions. We are rethinking student onboarding, and I will just say out of this, not to go over the whole thing, that there are two really big things that are happening here. We are deserting prerequisite remediation because we know we need to, because we know that very small percentages of students who go into remediation, into basic skills, ever successfully complete the college level courses. And we know that we disproportionately sort low-income students and students of color out of college and into remediation. We're getting away from that because we know how. And once you know how, it becomes a civil rights violation when you don't do it.
Amen.
Okay, so that's one big thing. And another big thing is that we are front-end loading career exploration. Because we're creating these interest areas, students need to have a way of sorting themselves into an interest area. The interest area itself is a choice architecture move. It helps students to narrow from those 300 courses down to 7 options that they have, and most students are able to do that. But we still, most career services in community colleges in the past has been something that happens at the end of students' experiences when they get help with job placement or whatever it is comes next. No, we're moving it to the front end and often even into high schools so that students can begin to make good choices. So the contemplation about how do we do this career exploration, how much of it can be done online, how much of it can be done in orientation, do we need a student success course or something like it within each of the interest areas that empowers students to learn about accounting, marketing, and the other 15 aspects of business or aspects of information technology or aspects of health careers so that they have a more informed way of choosing a specific program of study within the interest areas. Now, let me be quick to say that these are pathways, not prisons. And students can still change their minds, and they will. Statistically, they're more likely to change their minds within an interest area than across. So I came here thinking I was going to do accounting. I hate accounting, but I love marketing. That kind of switching. But even across interest areas, they can do that. What it will do is trigger an advising session so that we can help ensure that they are making informed choices. So this many of your courses that you've taken will move over here. You have these additional courses and this much additional time and this much additional cost for your education. And at the end of this new pathway, you have these kinds of transfer options and these kinds of jobs, careers at these kinds of salaries. It's the informed decision making that becomes our obligation. So what other shifts? Shifts in student advising, which go hand in hand with the onboarding. And it is far less about what happens right before and right at the beginning of a semester, and it is more about very intentionally what happens all through the student's experience and the milestones that they achieve. Teaching and learning. Let me just say, for the sake of being on the record, that if we can have beautiful visuals about interest areas and we can have beautifully mapped pathways, but if we don't have high quality teaching and learning that goes on within those pathways, then why did we do all of that work? And so looking at what we know about what constitutes effective teaching and the extent to which we can build those effective teaching strategies in discipline-appropriate ways into the pathways is incredibly important. And again, something that can happen within the context of interest areas, not just today, but forever. It's a constant process. Okay, and then the whole the whole notion of institutional culture, the way we do things around here. We are shifting from the constant question of whether students are college ready to the question of whether the colleges are ready for the students. Are we ready for the students we have? Not the students we wish we had, the students we think we once had but probably didn't. Are we ready for our students? We're moving to be repetitive from sanctioned wandering to purposeful progress. Isn't it interesting that do you have divisions in your college? We organize ourselves by divisions. They're so aptly named. And so we're into breaking those things down because we need to work together across instruction and student services, credit and non-credit, basic skills and college level, across all of the divisions that we have made up in our higher ed minds. We need to be working together. Students don't have their divisions in their heads, or at least they shouldn't. I want to say something here about the adventure that you're embarking on this afternoon with your interest area conversations. One of the best educational experiences I've had in recent years was at Gutman Community College in the City University of New York, where they had the luxury of creating a brand new institution, and they created it around a pathways model. They have 5 interest areas, if you will. They call them schools. What do they call them? Houses. They call them houses, which is odd because they don't have any student housing. But what they do have are cross-functional teams that are organized around each of those interest areas. They are teams of program faculty from within the interest area, of counselors and advisors that have been embedded in, attached to those interest areas, and they have resource people that are assigned to them that may not be their only assignment, but people from learning resources, from student life, from instructional design, someone who knows a whole lot about learning outcomes, assessment, and so on. And I happened to be at Gutman on a day in the fall when this team was having its end of semester conference about how things had gone during that semester. And the conversation they were having was, first they talked about learning and what learning outcomes assessment, and they said, we got this course sequence wrong. This course really needs to come before this other course. We need to switch that. And then they said, in our program level outcomes, we've got 2 really important learning outcomes for students, but we're not teaching them anywhere. And so let's figure out where in this course sequence we need to be embedding those outcomes. And then they talked about Charlie. They talked about individual students and how they were faring and how they were advancing, progressing or not. Charlie wasn't doing well. Charlie came into that particular group as kind of the class clown, and he had gotten very serious about his bioscience, but his student colleagues wouldn't let him out of the clown box. And so they were talking about what they could do to be helpful to Charlie so that they could keep him. So blessings on you as you embark on this process of continuing to design within the interest areas and as appropriate to the interest areas, the kinds of processes that you're going to use for continuing to make that experience better, for evaluating it, and for attending to individual students. Big shift from teaching the class. What? Did you want to take a break now? We're switching people from teaching the classes faculty want to teach when they want to teach them to teaching the classes students need to take when they need to take them. I was looking at the work groups that are organized and planned for Sierra, and I do see that precision course scheduling is on that list, that to-do list. Once we know what students' educational plans are, then we have the immediate capability to make sure that we are offering the courses they need in order to continue to make progress through those plans. Starting with the end in mind, I'm just putting this up as a kind of a reminder to you as you have your sessions this afternoon about the process that students go through. I will tell you, it's step 4, but the colleges that we're working with across the country on Guided Pathways are finding that interest areas have become a very powerful marketing tool for students because they can find their way into your college through that set of interest areas that you've identified. All right. So I want to lobby you here for a minute, and then we're going to talk equity, and then we're going to just talk. You have the opportunity in these interest area sessions. I know, or I assume, based on talking with your folks earlier, that you are going to have a set of questions to talk about in your meeting. So, answer their questions, but I'd like for you to keep these things in mind. With my premise here is that we need to take interest areas from a list of things on a piece of paper. Now we've got graphics, we've even got t-shirts. And I want to encourage you to think about how we take that from being a list of things on paper to being a set of large-scale learning communities for your students. What is it that you can do, bringing ingenuity and creativity and knowledge of your disciplines to the conversation to enrich and fill out using evidence-based practice, the kind of experience you want for students in the visual and performing arts area or in the other creatively named interest areas that you have. So the first thing you want to do is build a cohort at every opportunity is one of the student success maxims that we have learned, and you can do that within your learning community, within your interest area, but only if you're intentional about it because of the kind of students we have. You have to be purposeful and intentional. You want to work hard at how you do the onboarding into the interest area so that you do create that sense of connection and belonging for the students who are there. The power of purpose. We have data from Tennessee that I didn't happen to include in this presentation, but very, very powerfully illustrates the simple power of students choosing an interest area. They call them focus areas in Tennessee, but the slide shows that the simple act of having a purpose, of declaring an interest area has a very strong effect on credit accumulation for students and progress toward degrees. So what is it that you're going to do, once again, intentionally to emphasize purpose? You can use the interest area conversations to connect classrooms to applied learning and to co-curricular learning as appropriate to the particular interest area on which you're working. And here's the quintessential community college challenge. We want to perfect the art of holding high expectations for students while also providing high levels of support. That's the way we can work most effectively with community college students. That's the way we can both promote completion and reduce equity gaps. So those are my design principles for you going into your afternoon conversations, if you can just hold those in your heads. I just have one more slide here, and it's just to provide some examples of some things that we see going on with regard to areas of interest, meta majors across the country. We see colleges that are contextualizing orientation and student success courses into their interest areas so that they can use that as part of both cohort building and career exploration within the meta major. We have, and you're illustrating this, we have color codes, we have icons, we have language, name tags, t-shirts, sweatshirts, ball caps, all kinds of things. And we have colleges that are creating Facebook workplace pages for each interest area, where students can post things about study groups or about co-curricular activities, and faculty can post things about whatever they want to post that are related to what is going into going on in that interest area. We find that it is very powerful, and I would say essential, that counselors and advisors be assigned to specific interest areas. Why? Because we've basically had unreasonable expectations for what individual human beings are able to do in terms of understanding 140 programs or more, and understanding all of the courses in those programs and all of the transfer options and all of the career and job opportunities. That's not possible for individual people, and I'm going to tell you two things about students and what they say. One is they hate it when they get bad information from anybody. They hate it. They also hate it when they go for advising, and every time they go, they have to see a different person. And then they have to tell their story all over again. They have to go through that, and they hate it. And so we can arrange things, we can design ourselves and design the experience for students in ways that keep that from happening, and this is one of them. Finding ways, as I said earlier, to facilitate, promote career exploration within the interest areas. We have service learning, experiential learning. We have Phi Theta Kappa chapters that are, or sub-chapters that are contextualized, debate club, other things that are discipline enriching and discipline appropriate, as indicated there. Okay. Whoa. Do you have a little bit to do? This is what I consider fun. I hope you do. And I hope this afternoon, as you come together with your colleagues around these interest areas, that you too will find it an opportunity to exercise ingenuity and creativity in this work. I'm going to close with a couple of remarks about equity. This is why we do this work. This is why I am here. It's why I don't think we really have much of a choice, because of what we've learned about what helps students, particularly students who are diverse in terms of race, ethnicity, first-generation college status, economic status. We have an obligation here. So what can we say about this? One is achieving equity doesn't happen by itself, even if we're good people with good hearts who care about our students. We have to be intentional, purposeful, and courageous in bringing the equity lens to every single design decision we make about our interest areas, about the pathways at large. Now here's the good news. Equity is in part, and in large part, accomplished by changing the educational experience that we design for students if we are being careful to incorporate in our pathways the kinds of experiences that we know from what we've learned really make a difference for students of color, for students from low-income background. Connection, belonging, high expectations and high support, persistent advising, active learning, all of those things we know from research matter. Cohorts matter. So we have built into the model a lot of the elements, the features, the practices that we have learned really matter for these students, but we're not done that yet. First and foremost, we have to be willing to disaggregate our data about student progress and success so that we know, and I don't mean just a few people know, I mean that we all live with the realities about which students disproportionately make it through Sierra colleges and which ones don't make it, and that we monitor that persistently over time. But I'll tell you that disaggregating data is only a first step, and it's not adequate. You know, you can weigh yourself all day long and you don't lose weight. So, but then comes the hard part. The hard part is that we have to be willing to ask questions and look with courage at what it is in our institutions that, despite best efforts, despite goodwill, despite caring about our students, perpetuates institutional racism and disproportionate outcomes for students. So, what does that mean? I'm going to make some suggestions about where along the way in the design and implementation of guided pathways we have to be really careful and bring that equity lens and invite in colleagues and others and external experts to help us see things that we may not see. Now, one of the first things I'm going to say is that we have to look at our program mix. You know, I have these questions. Do you offer any programs at Sierra College where there are no jobs in your service area? Do you offer any programs where students can come here and go to school for 2 years and get a degree and not make more money than they would have if they had never come here in the first place? That's okay. Do you have any programs where students can come here and work for 2 years or more and attain an associate degree and get a job that has wages at the federal poverty level? Yes, you do. I guarantee you do. And so I've been starting little grass fires, maybe forest fires all over the country, asking people to, I know you're sensitive about this, but I live in a forest too. I live on a mountain in Colorado, so I feel your pain. So here's the deal. Anybody want to name programs?
Human development.
Human development, early childhood education, nursing assistant, cosmetology. You look up the wages because you need to do that when you're designing pathways. I'm going to say to you that you will find programs where this is the case. And so some of these programs have community and social value, and it's not our fault that we pay people so poorly for those jobs, but it is our fault if we keep that secret from students. So our first and foremost obligation is transparency. A student can make a noble choice to major in early childhood education if she loves children, she wants to serve, there are jobs, she likes the hours, but she will not make that choice because it pays a family supporting wage, unless we fail to tell her. Or him. Actually, in early childhood, the people who work directly with children are largely black and brown women. You get up the ladder a little bit, you'll find the occasional white woman in a management position, but you don't find guys. On the whole. So, what's our obligation? Transparency. And in order to be transparent, we have to know. And then we have to, as we are putting pathways out on our website and talking about pathways with students, we have to be sharing information so that they are making informed choices. So we look at our program mix. Then we ask ourselves about how we are training ourselves in reviewing the language you use and the processes we use for helping students know what their options are and selecting the option is for them. So here's the deal. Georgetown Center for Education and the Economy, Tony Carnevale's work tells us that across American higher education, Black and Hispanic students are enrolled in disproportionately high numbers in programs leading to low-paying jobs. That is us. That is us as institutions perpetuating disparity. And so we have to make sure that we're not just saying out of the goodness of our hearts, hey, we can get you through this short-term program and you can be out making $25,000, $30,000, $35,000 in 6 months. And then we never talk about becoming a pediatric cardiologist or an industrial engineer. Am I right? Okay, so part of the work on guided pathways is to ensure through constant vigilance and training for people that we are opening up options for students and not shutting them down, that we are not disproportionately encouraging low-income students and students of color into programs that lead to low-paying jobs. Okay. Not that this is hard or anything. We've talked about developmental education and the civil rights elements of it. Once we know that there are things we can do that don't involve sorting students out of college in very large numbers, and that do involve getting students through college-level math and English and other college-level courses in their first year, then we do those things. If we embed academic support in courses, I have another piece of video that I didn't bring that shows a group of Latino guys talking about why they don't go to tutoring. Why do you suppose they say they don't go to the tutoring center?
They don't want to look stupid.
That is exactly right. Take a bow. They said, I mean, it's poignant and painful what they say in this conversation. They say it's mostly about pride. That they have been told throughout their high school career that they aren't college material, that they're not going to make it in college, that, you know, they just don't even belong there. So why would they voluntarily identify themselves one more time as deficient? This is an equity issue, and this is one of the compelling reasons that we embed academic supports in the syllabi, and we make it the way we do college around here, because we care about helping those students be successful. So this is where I often exploit my granddaughter, who is a recent graduate of Dartmouth. And my question to you is, when she went to Dartmouth, do you think orientation was optional? Do you think that the entire first year experience was optional? Do you think that her physics professor suggested that she maybe sometimes, perhaps if it was convenient, she felt like it, she should go to the physics lab? No. So if they can do it at Dartmouth, we can do it here. We know our students have financial problems. There are a lot of models emerging around the country about how to be aware. The community college doesn't have to do everything, but having ways to connect students to the resources, state or federal or community, for which they are eligible and from which they could benefit is especially important. We have to both strengthen our skills in culturally responsive teaching and advising. We have to address the reality of unconscious bias and microaggression. I have told this story before. There's a guy that you may know. He's in California now. He moved from University of Pennsylvania, Sean Harper, who is an African-American scholar and an expert in race in higher education. And he's really, really bright, helpful guy and very practical. But recently, he wrote an article on eliminating racism from the classroom. And it had 8 guidelines in it. And I thought, great, you know, practical assistance for us. Only the first guideline was, first, rid yourself of unconscious bias. So you get it. I mean, I'm going, how am I going to deal with something that I don't recognize that I have? So it's not easy. It's just simply necessary. It is simply part of our job to be willing to raise these issues, to hear from other people, and to act on what we can learn. And all of that goes to we need to look like our students. Amen? Did I hear an amen? Okay. Okay, so I'm showing you this because it's a website that we just launched at AACC with the best that we could find. Not everything we could ever find about guided pathways, but the best that our national partners could provide. So if you're curious, you can spend many hours looking through that. So now I want to hear from you. Comments, questions, concerns, arguments, anything that you want to say. We need you on a microphone, and we've got people that are going to run around with the mics.
On the microphone, I like some of the stuff say about guided pathways, but what I'm really concerned about, I teach engineering.
Yes?
I get a lot of students who come in because their parents are convinced they want to be an engineer.
Yeah.
And it's just not for them, right? And so when you say you're embarrassed that you have 96 credit hours of a student taking those classes, I would argue with that to say, I'm actually for that. I started in pre-law. I did pre-law for a year. I did pre-psychology for a year, and I finally started engineering many years later. I completed community college with 125 credits, and when I was hired, all of those credits served me well. I took business law, I took psychology, I think it's good. I don't want us to turn into a giant machine that stamps out students. And you come in here, hop on this path, don't get off the path. And then you have to get out. Yeah. I think that would not serve students well.
Okay, thank you for that. So I do thank you for that, and I'm not going to tell you that's the first time I've ever heard that concern. A couple of responses I would offer for your consideration. One is that not every student can afford to do that. I'm going to be even bolder and say most of the students who come to Sierra College can't afford to do that. So let's consider the equity implications of wandering around. Number two, if it is the case, and you can make a compelling argument for this, that exploration is a good thing, then I ask you, why is it that as institutions we have done basically squat to support that in a meaningful way that leads to an end? And so one of the things you have an opportunity to talk about here is for students who come here, some of them are directed, some of them think they want to do something and then they end up knowing they want to do something else, and that's going to work. But some come basically clueless, and we need to have a way for them to do the exploration they need to do, but to do it in a way that is supported and intentional and purposeful and leads to a result. Now, are they going to get to graduate school and do something else? I did. You know? Okay, so yes, these are not prisons, they're pathways. And so let's provide the options for students who need and want to, you know, make tracks and get on through. And let's provide support for students who want or need to do the exploration. Yeah.
I suppose I should use that. I have a question about not the transparency part of it, but because I don't have any question about that we should be honest about what salaries are available from the kinds of jobs that are offered. But the truth to me is there aren't enough jobs that are above the poverty level available. If all of our students do well and graduate and get these degrees, they're still not going to get paid.
Send them to CTE.
Just, yeah. I mean, we need to change a lot of stuff that isn't under our control. Yeah. And so how discouraging is that going to be for our students, I guess, to tell them that this is a great career pathway, you're going to love this, you know, based upon what you've said, but you won't be able to support your family ever.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
okay.
I mean,
yeah,
I've
right.
had 3 jobs my whole life almost because of that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent point. And, you know, what can we do about that? Well, one thing we can do is when we're building these pathways with the end in mind, we can make ourselves aware and really current with what is out there, what the jobs are, what the salaries are, and that sort of thing, so that we can help students make informed choices. We can also decide sometimes that there are programs that we don't need to be offering because there are no jobs. On the other hand, people, I'm a psych major. I did a one-student focus group at my hotel last night with a new student at Sierra College. She was staying in the hotel, the room across from mine. The room next to her got raided by the police at 5 o'clock this morning. That was fun, yeah. So, it wasn't her room. She is an amazing woman. She's a young African-American woman. She tells me she's a RISE student. She tells me she's a Promise student. She tells me that she is so excited about coming here and becoming an adolescent counseling psychologist. I said, so what do you understand about what you need to do educationally in order to achieve that goal? And she said, I need to get my doctorate. I said, amen, sister. So somebody here has done some really good work with this person, and she told me that was true, but I don't know who you are, or I would call you out by name. So yeah, when I went to do a master's degree in psychology, what the faculty said to me was, at the master's level, if you're here because you love psychology, that's good. If you're here because you want a job, you should go over to the accounting department. So, yeah. Part of the transparency is that if you have certain kinds of goals, that you need to know that there are multiple steps and levels that you need to go through in order to get there. If there are just no jobs, I work with some colleges in Idaho, they have a terrible time because Idaho is the only state in the union where you don't have the relationship that exists everywhere else between educational attainment level and earnings. Your earnings don't go up in Idaho if you get a college degree, and that's a real bummer. And so they're basically educating people to leave the state. I mean, they are. They are. It's hard, but we have to know what it is that we're dealing with and deal with it, and then share what we know with our students. Yeah?
I have one follow-up.
Yeah, sure.
And that's that, I mean, I teach geography.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what we do.
I do.
And yet, I feel like that's a solid degree for people, because the truth is, there are a lot of really good jobs out there that we have to convince people that we're going to be great at that job. It's not like an automatic thing, like being an accountant.
That's right.
Okay, you
Yeah.
can be an accountant.
No, you're right. And I think you're going to get better and better at that through your work with your interest groups, and then what goes on your website and your other student-facing materials that say to students, if you study in this area, here are possibilities for you. And I send blessings to you in getting that done, because I agree with you. All right, what else? Yes, sir.
my name is Sergio. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And I'm the director of our Student Engagement Centers, which is our
Did you say student?
Student Engagement Centers,
Yes.
which is our cross-cultural center, Pride Center, Women and Gender Resource Center. To my knowledge, we're the only California community college to have those 3 identity-based centers.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something we should be very proud of, and I'm honored to be part of it. So when I see your list of the equity recommendations, one of the things that's missing for me is around symbolism. How do we symbolize, how are we showing our commitment to equity? And I think this is where we have to think about the optics around how we present ourselves.
Yes.
Who we present in front of our student scholars. And I just think that that's something that we need to be very intentional around how we do that. So if we have, let's say, career panels in our interest areas, are we reflecting the diverse populations that are in those areas? Mm-hmm. You know I had a conversation with a couple of faculty from one of the CT programs, I don't want, about, we know there's an underrepresentation of racial minoritized student scholars mm-hmm. in your programs. Why not gather people from that trade that reflect that diversity, rather than just an all-white panel, like I saw yesterday at Convocation. I loved it. I loved Convocation. Yet it was not reflective of the diversity of our student body, let alone our staff, right?
Thank you.
So I asked that because the other part of it is we have to protect diversity. Because last October, 2017, white nationalist propaganda appeared on our campus. And that's real. And that is something that deeply, viscerally impacts our equity populations. If you're trans-identified, if you're of a racial minoritized community, if you have a disability, all these identity groups were attacked on our campus. And are we willing to protect diversity, not just celebrate it, y'all? We have to be able to protect it. That's also a part of this equitizing Sierra College.
Thank you.
That it's not just enough to be academically focused, it's also our facilities and how it is that we care for one another, how we represent each other. I don't know, there's no question there.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I just want you to pull up a slide. I'm taking notes for someone. They fell yesterday. And it was a slide on where do we start from here to now, from start with the end in mind.
Oh.
So while you're answering the next question, if you could just pull that slide up.
Okay, I'll do that. Next question. Okay, good.
I'm totally on board with this. I think this is a great idea, but I'm wondering how much of this is being addressed at the high school level.
Good
because
question.
I have a high schooler, and all she hears is, what university are you going to go to?
Yeah.
And I've talked to her and I said, here's the pot of money that there is for you to go to school. The only way to make that feasible is if you go to Sierra College for the first 2 years. And she said to me, I've been a community college professor her entire life. She said to me, I don't want to tell the other kids that I'm going to go to Sierra College because she's embarrassed by it. And you know, over time I've convinced her, well, it's smarter because you're going to save money down the line. But that needs to be addressed at the high school level. Not so much, because they still believe if you just go to college, you're going to get a job. It needs to be kind of what I've done with her is what career do you want? What major is that? What school can provide that for you? How much does it cost? And then what is your average salary when you get out compared to what you pay in tuition?
So, excellent question. Colleges that have been working on guided pathways are reaching back into their high schools for a couple of compelling reasons. One of them is that across the country, colleges are getting increasingly dependent on dual and concurrent enrollment for sustaining their enrollment levels. I'm going to say to you that dual and concurrent enrollment is the place where many, many, many students begin to accumulate excess credit because they are taking random courses rather than affiliating with a program that would, you know, make their courses add up to something and potentially lead them to the community college and then on to the university. And so there's a lot of that kind of work going on. It's also a good place to start with initial work on career exploration and college success strategies. So when you finish all this stuff we're talking about today, there will be plenty left to do. Another reason, though, is the financial one and the value proposition for community colleges. Not only are you going to create large-scale community colleges and ways of students connecting and belonging and doing applied learning and doing that in good company, but I commend to you the work that's been done at Lorraine Community College in Ohio, where I have seen PowerPoint slides where they show students the value proposition and with clear transfer pathways, how you can do your associate degree at Sierra College, at Lorraine Community College, and how much money you will save in dollars and cents by doing your first 2 years in the community college and then completing at wherever, Sac State or whatever your major transfer institutions are. It's a very compelling case that they have explicitly put out there for their students. So thank you for raising that issue. Yes?
Good morning. Thank you for your talk. I fully feel with my colleague who so emotionally expressed the symbolism, how important it is.
Yes.
But I am an immigrant who is a product of community college, UCLA, and Cal State Northridge. One thing that breaks my heart every semester is the fact that so many students who are taking my classes are not able to afford textbooks and homework or whatever else that they need to spend money on. And I think if we are after equity, we need to find a way to support students like that, which means that perhaps our library should have a large number of textbooks available for students to use during school hours or even after hours, so that that equity is more practically enforced. So, anyway,
okay, thank
that
you.
was my point.
I think you've made a great point that is part of a larger number of points you could make. I will say to you that looking at it from the national level, the movement toward open educational resources is gaining substantial momentum in order to reduce to virtually zero the textbook costs for students. And that's something that you need to be talking about while you are building these interest areas for your students. But there are other things that pertain to student financial stability, as I showed on the equity slide, that I agree with you. We need to be having those conversations as well. Thank you. Yes, anyone else?
I just wanted to follow up on the prior comment about the connection with high school. I would argue that you have to start even earlier than that, because by the time students are teens, they've already got it in their head exactly what they want. They have a tremendous amount of peer pressure, and those conversations need to be starting at our K through 8 institutions locally, so that they have built a relationship and an understanding. So I just wanted to follow up on that.
All right.
But I wanted to get to our important part-time faculty. We're so grateful and thankful that they're here. As you said, there's so much work to be done, and in order for them to be engaged, they need to be consistently, not just at the beginning of the semester, supported. I was sitting next to an adjunct who works at 4 campuses and is going to have to leave a little bit early today to take care of some other business, but there needs to be a commitment long-term on not only supporting them and including them, but also bringing them into the full-time ranks so that we can do this work.
Okay.
Time for 2 more questions.
So I'm all about the career focus, but having interacted with some recent high school graduates, they've enrolled in community college, not ours, and one of the first questions they were asked were, what career do you want? And the student said to me, wait, that's why I'm going to community college. I don't know what career, I don't know what I'm interested in. And so I really hope that we shape the language into what are your gifts, what are your talents, what are your interests? And that becomes the focus. And I'm curious, are there schools out there that you're familiar with that are doing exploration really well? Because I do think that there can be a model that we could also be using to give those students who really don't have that career in mind and they do want to explore, who's doing it well?
Yeah. I appreciate the question, and I will think about it and send some information back. We have colleges that have done a really wonderful job with their student-facing information, their websites and a lot. Things that have like burning glass and other data that run in the background so that students have current information about jobs and careers in their service area and the salaries at different educational levels and that kind of thing. But they all bond that with work that they do in classrooms through a student success course or, a meta major learning, an interest area, first year experience, or that sort of thing. What I really appreciate about what you're saying is the notion of opening up opportunities, but we have to really think about the question of whether some significant number of our students, particularly those from low-income backgrounds, first-generation college students who come not knowing what the full extent of their options may be. And so a big part of the career exploration needs to be to broaden the possibilities rather than to narrow them too dramatically. So I'm sorry I don't have a more specific response for you, but we'll work on it. Yes, last question up there.
Hi, I have two comments. One is that I think that when you're looking at careers, you should also talk about cultures, the culture of that career, and whether or not the person is going to be a good fit with that culture. Because that's what I see a lot of students failing in careers, is they're choosing a career that maybe they're talented in or they have skills in, but it's not a career that the culture fits them. And also millennials want to work in functional cultures, not cultures where there's not equity and things like that. So, yeah.
Culture if you don't put some people in there that are not equitable.
I think we've got a conversation to have here.
And then two. Yeah. I want to say one more thing.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, another thing that happened to my granddaughter at Dartmouth was that she went thinking she was going to major in engineering, and the culture was so toxic for women that she left and became a math major. That's not an ideal thing.
Right.
So let's have that conversation.
That's really
important. Let's have that conversation.
The other thing is that when I tell my students that the reason that they should come to Sierra College is because there's 2 reasons. One is it's less expensive. The other is that we have excellent teachers here.
Yes.
And I think we need to acknowledge that. And we have excellent part-time and full-time teachers.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. Okay, people, we are now out of time, and I'm going to leave you with one farewell note.
And with one wrong action or one wrong word, you can totally turn them off, and they'll turn around and walk out the door and never come back. They need to remember that they hold this person's futures in their hands, this person's future in their hands, this person's future in their hands, 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 in their hands.
Go out there this afternoon and next week and shape some more futures. Thank you so much for the work that you do.
Okay, we will have a 15-minute break. Thank you, Dr. McClenney, for giving us so much to think about and work on this afternoon.